Is he? Today is Wednesday, October 25th, and we have breaking news just happening within the last few moments or so. Welcome to this edition of Political Update here on the Atlanta News First streaming channel on YouTube and all of our streaming apps. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by producer Maria Moreau and our political reporter Doug Reardon, broadcasting from our Midtown Atlanta studios. And Doug, we just within the last few moments or so, it's taken us a little while to get here, but we finally have a new Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Only minutes ago, U.S. Rep. Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, was elected strictly along partisan party lines in Congress, becoming the 56th Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. This comes more than 3 weeks, after California Republican Kevin McCarthy became the first House Speaker in American history to be ousted from his job. Like I said, it's been a dramatic 3 weeks. Talk to us a little bit about just some of the dissension and chaos that we've seen among congressional Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, well, those are the best words for it. I think I lost count, but you said about 3 weeks. I think it was 22 or 23 days that this body, one of the most important governing bodies in the country, and certainly a branch of government here, was without a leader. And so this is certainly welcome news, I think, to Democrats and Republicans. So now we can kind of get things back on track in Congress. So as you mentioned, Mike Johnson, who is a Louisiana Republican, got that with 220 votes. He only needed 217, which most candidates before him had failed well short of to obtain. And so we had even seen a representative from here in Georgia, Austin Scott from down in Tifton, throw his name into the hat for a little bit. So it felt like a bit of a free-for-all. I heard somebody describe it as drinking from a fire hose with all of the people who had thrown their names into the hat at this point. And honestly, Johnson was kind of a quiet contender, but he is someone who has held small leadership roles before in Congress, and so he does have that experience. He is a vocal supporter of former President Donald Trump and was actually a key player in some of those efforts in 2020 from the congressional side to try and overturn the results there. And so I think this will make some Republicans happier than others, certainly, but there were enough of them that signed on to have him act as their leader, and just in time, too. I mean, we are just days away now from another government shutdown. That stopgap spending bill is going to run out in, again, just a matter of days, and the government will shut down. So that is a top priority for Congress right now, as is getting some foreign aid packages together for some really important allies, including, of course, Israel, who is at war right now with Hamas. There's lots of work to do there, and continuing to fund the war in Ukraine and trying to help them out with some arms deals and weapons deals as well. And so there are a lot of important things. This came at a really terrible time for Congress, and so now we can finally hopefully get things back on track. I know Democrats have expressed their willingness to just seat somebody at that dais so that they could get these things working and moving, and that's hopefully where we'll go from here.
Hopefully so. And like you said, Austin Scott, representative from Georgia's 8th Congressional District, was one of the candidates earlier this week and late last week who announced he was running. There was a secret ballot held yesterday, I believe, and also the day before, where Republicans gathered in a conference room and were really hopefully able to come up with a nominee, and that is what has happened today, just moments ago. As we mentioned, Mike Johnson, congressional Republican from Louisiana, is now the 56th House Speaker on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Let's move a little closer to home, Doug. This is an issue that you covered yesterday, and we'll have a package from one of our reporters, Rebecca Schramm, here in a few moments. But yesterday, the Georgia Supreme Court upheld the state's very controversial ban on the procedure of having an abortion after approximately 6 weeks of pregnancy. Now, this decision that came down from the state Supreme Court early yesterday morning on Tuesday really was a reversal of a lower court's temporary ban on the procedure until some future legal challenges unfold. And a lot of this is just very technically into the weeds from a legal standpoint. But talk to us a little bit about what the reactions have been from folks like the ACLU and other organizations that you interviewed for your piece.
Yeah, and of course they were the plaintiffs in this case, so they were not happy. They were the ones who brought the suit against this 6-week abortion ban, which some people refer to as a heartbeat ban because 6 weeks is around the time where you can detect a fetal heartbeat. They have their own blood type, and so that was the cutoff point. Although other states have done that with this 6-week mark, this certainly still stands as one of the strictest abortion bans in the country. It was passed in 2019 when, interestingly enough, Roe was still in effect. It was still the law of the land, Roe versus Wade, saying that people had a federal right to abortion as health care. And so that was really the genesis for this case was, hey, when you passed it in the Georgia legislature, it was directly in contradiction with federal law. And that was the argument here. There was a doctrine in law known as void ab initio, which means you cannot pass a law at the state level that trumps an existing state law or something that exists at the federal level as law. And that's exactly what this ban did. And a judge agreed. A Fulton County Superior Court judge, Robert McBurney, who folks might know as being a central player in the Trump indictment, said, that's exactly right. This was federal law at the time. This was in contradiction to it. Federal law takes the cake here, even though it was later overturned. What he was suggesting was lawmakers would have to go back and try and pass this again without the existence of Roe. When it was kicked up to the Supreme Court, they heard arguments back this winter in March, and yesterday was their decision day, and they said that is just not the case. State lawmakers essentially have liberty to pass this law because Roe is overturned. The state Supreme Court said it was never the law of the land, and thus the state bill here took precedence over it. And so this isn't the end. Certainly want to note that there is another piece of this case. That was just one piece that was ruled on yesterday. There's another piece of this that's going to have to deal with privacy laws and people's right to have their medical procedures be unto them and them only. This is now being argued in the same exact superior court, this lower court, that made that decision claiming that the law was unconstitutional. And so what could happen is this very same judge could say, yes, a citizen's right to privacy is more important than what's spelled out in this bill, but it could go back up to the Supreme Court where they could disagree, and that would be the end of the line for that argument. But we should note, as the ACLU, other plaintiffs like Feminist Women's Healthcare Center of Atlanta, Sister Song, they told us that, in Georgia especially, interestingly enough, privacy laws are much, much more robust here in this state than at the federal level. So they seem to think that this next argument that they're making over the next couple of weeks and months may even be a stronger one to get this abortion bill overturned. But that's just something we're going to have to wait and see on.
And we will wait and see. Like you said, this is not the end of the story, and this has been kicked back to Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney's courtroom, if I'm not mistaken. Let's hear more about this issue from our own Rebecca Schramm.
An attorney for the Center for Reproductive Rights is telling us, quote, "We refuse to back down and we will keep fighting to protect Georgians' fundamental rights." Here's what the other side is saying.
We've been waiting a long time for this.
Pro-life advocates are thrilled with the Georgia Supreme Court's decision.
Today is a day of victory. Thousands of children's lives are going to continue to be saved because our Life Act, the Georgia Heartbeat Law, is allowed to stay in effect.
Several groups that support abortion access originally sued the state, saying Georgia's so-called heartbeat law, which prohibits most abortions after fetal cardiac activity is detected in the womb, is unconstitutional because it became law when Roe v. Wade was still the law of the land under U.S. Supreme Court precedent. The state appealed to the Georgia Supreme Court, which today overturned the Fulton County Court ruling.
I think this is somewhat expected, right? The
constitutional law expert Anthony Michael Kreis of Georgia State University tells me the ruling won't be the end of it.
that doesn't answer the fundamental question about whether there's a right to an abortion under the Georgia Constitution. It just simply said that the Supreme Court said today that legislators have the right to test that question.
He says the plaintiffs will now go back to the lower court with another claim that the ban violates Georgians' right to privacy and equal protection under the state constitution. He predicts the state will argue that the right doesn't apply to an abortion because of a third-party harm.
I suspect that we will see some movement fairly quickly, but then, of course, there will be another appeals process, and the Georgia Supreme Court will have to decide on this question again.
My colleague Patrick Quinn is speaking with a representative from the ACLU of Georgia. We will have updates for you throughout the evening. In downtown Atlanta at the Georgia Supreme Court, Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.
That was Rebecca Schramm talking about yesterday's state Supreme Court decision upholding Georgia's 6-week ban on abortions. Also, another bit of news that happened on Tuesday. Jenna Ellis became the 4th co-defendant in the Donald Trump Georgia election interference case, the massive organized crime series of indictments that were handed down by Fulton County District Attorney Bonnie Willis some months ago to reach a plea deal with Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Jenna Ellis joined Cindy Powell, Kenneth Chesbrough, and Scott Graham Hall as the 4 co-defendants so far who have either reached a plea agreement or pled guilty to a certain number of charges as it relates to former President Donald Trump's alleged attempts to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election. We're also seeing other media reports spread across other outlets that former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in the federal case regarding charges brought against the nation's 45th president for allegedly mishandling classified documents. Jenna Ellis made a tearful apology and just really a statement of contrition in Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee's courtroom yesterday. Really one of the more dramatic pieces of court video that we've seen so far that's come out of this case. But there are a number of other co-defendants whom we're speculating may be reaching plea deals in the coming weeks as the case in Fulton County against former President Donald Trump continues to proceed. Also happening this week, early voting is now and has been underway for a couple of weeks in a number of local Metro Atlanta municipal elections. Election day is Tuesday, November 7th. Some of these races are in DeKalb County. The city of Brookhaven is electing a new mayor and city council, and also in the city of Atlanta, where the all-important Board of Education is holding a number of municipal elections to oversee one of the largest public school systems in the entire country. Our own Madeline Montgomery has this report on the Atlanta Public School and Board of Education upcoming elections.
It's 5 seats out of the 9 total, so over half of the school board being elected. It's a big deal because they're deciding where the money goes and who exactly is hired. So they're in control of the $1.6 billion budget for APS, and the school board also is going to be in charge of picking the district's next superintendent. Right now, Atlanta Public Schools have an interim superintendent. 3 of the board positions represent specific locations, while 2 of the seats are citywide. While local school board elections don't usually draw in the biggest crowds, Atlanta's is drawing in longtime voters like Anthony Gamble.
A lot of people don't know about it, but it's very important. But they need to come out. I'm talking in groves, you need to come on out for the children.
Early voting is going to go through the Friday before Election Day, which is Tuesday, November 7th. And then if there needs to be a runoff, that will be December 5th. And you can go online and check exactly where you need to be voting and if this is your school district that you are voting for. Reporting in downtown Atlanta, I'm Madeline Montgomery, Atlanta News First.
That was our own Madeline Montgomery talking about the municipal elections happening for the Atlanta public school system and the Board of Education, reminding you that early voting continues through this week and Election Day throughout Metro Atlanta. Municipal elections are typically held during odd number of years, which is why on November 7th, 2023, there will be a number of local municipal elections happening throughout Metro Atlanta, and we encourage all of you to go and exercise your constitutional right to vote. On another issue, tragically, the issue of gun control, gun safety measures, prohibiting the sale of certain firearms and their distribution remains at the forefront of the nation's political consciousness. I had a conversation earlier this week with Olivia Troy. She is the executive director of an organization called 97%. This is a coalition of gun owners and gun rights supporters who are advocating measures such as universal background checks and red flag laws in an effort to really bring some common ground and some bipartisanship and bipartisan solutions to the tragic issue that every few weeks or months always seems to make its way into our national political discourse, that being the issue of gun control and gun safety. Here's my interview with Olivia Troy.
We are a foundation that's focused really on bringing gun owners to the table and including them in the conversation about reducing gun deaths across the country by including them in the solutions. And we focus on doing research. We do polling of gun owners and non-gun owners alike to find common ground and look at the concerns that they're having. And then we also look at investing in technology that helps in support of our mission of reducing gun violence, whether it's investing in smart, safe holsters, such as companies like Vara Safety, but we look for innovative technology that can really make a difference in this space. I think a lot of these conversations happen in silos, and look, I'm from Texas. I grew up around guns, responsible gun ownership. Spent most of my career, I'm a gun owner myself. I spent most of my career around law enforcement or the military working in national security. So I think from our perspective is that we've done research and polling, we talk to gun owners, and the fact of the matter is that we are more focused on looking at solutions that will actually advance the conversation in this space, whether it's red flag laws or universal background checks and issues like that. For example, we just did recent polling very recently of gun owners across the country. And in that polling, 84% of those gun owners responded saying that they are concerned about gun crimes and the increased gun violence across the country. And a lot of those respondents, they said 75% of them feel that someone will be impacted by gun violence. And so I think from our perspective is we want to talk to gun owners and figure out where can we find common ground to actually make a difference together. Because what we hear is that they feel like they're not included in the conversation. They feel like politicians don't necessarily represent what they view or what they believe. They don't feel like the media sometimes understands or misrepresents what they're saying. And so we just want to have sort of a bipartisanship. And I say that in a way of not politics, right? We're not talking, gun violence does not discriminate, between Republicans and Democrats and independents. It impacts all of us. So really, I mean bipartisanship by bringing gun owners and non-gun owners into this conversation and steering away from solutions where there's not common support. We're not seeing it in our polling and focusing on the things where people agree on. I actually personally believe it's politicized, and I don't think that it should be. I think, I think that you'll find that gun owners, they cross the gamut. Republicans and Democrats that own guns, right? So I don't know why it has become such a polarizing issue at the national level. I do think that it needs to be less politicized in that way. And I think we need to be looking about how do we keep our loved ones safe? How do we actually start to make incremental change in this space? And part of it, to be honest, is doing this type of research to come to legislators and say, look, your constituents and gun owners and non-gun owners are looking at this from this lens, from these angles. These are the potential policies that they're looking at supporting. There is common ground here. Let's move away from having this be such a divisive issue. One of the most interesting results of our most recent polling was that 70% of the respondents to the poll said that they would like to see some type of gun reform enacted. Of those, 66% of those gun owners, for instance, thought that like guns should not be restricted, should be restricted on school grounds. They also thought they should be restricted in government buildings. 60% of these gun owners said that they thought that guns should not be allowed on college campuses, for example. So we are looking at very specific polling here to figure out where is the threshold for people? Where are there potential solutions that we could be looking at in order to present that forward and to help people think through this problem? I think a lot of the other areas that I'll raise is there is broad support for universal background checks, for example. There's broad support for red flag laws. And I would say that together with those two combined, we could really make a difference in this space. And I'll say this, I was recently at a gun store in near my neighborhood, and I had this conversation about red flag laws. And one thing that they said was that they're very frustrated because they want to make sure, well, if these things are going to exist, they have to be enforced. Or they also want to make sure that there's due process behind these red flag laws. They don't want there to be a situation where it's a vindictive kind of action that's taken against someone. We absolutely understand that. We believe that there should be quick court due process on it. We also believe that there should be fines. For example, if somebody tries to use that as a vindictive agenda in a vindictive way to get back at someone by raising a red flag law. So these are all the different kind of aspects that we're looking into to make sure that we're approaching this in a very substantive, methodical way. There is a way forward on this issue while still protecting the Second Amendment. Right? I am a gun owner at the head of this organization. I am focused on amplifying the voices of gun owners in a very substantive way. I think a lot of the time, sometimes there are the loudest voices in the room who represent a minority of the opinion. We're really trying to hopefully reach a broader coalition of people that will come together, because clearly the status quo is obviously not working at this time. I'm not going to discount the concerns. I understand that this is a very emotional issue for a lot of people, especially when it comes to school shootings. I understand that. I know that that is a very, very challenging topic that is impacting a lot of our communities and parents out there and worried about their children's safety and worried about their loved ones when you go to a grocery store and you don't know what's going to happen. But I also think that the most productive conversations are the ones where it is data and facts and research that supports where we are going to actually make a difference. And so I think that that's where the conversation should be focused on, rather than the broad based solutions like that paint a broad stroke. I think part of it, Tim, to be honest with you, is that I feel like gun owners at times when they see those types of conversations happen, it's almost like we get lumped together into this broad stroke where I feel like it's unfair. It's unfair to many gun owners, myself and others, who do care about this issue. But we also believe in the Second Amendment. We believe in the right to protect it. And so I think from our perspective, we'll continue to do research and show where there is potential avenues for solutions for taking steps forward. And I think that's where we need to be focused on. We need to be focused on making a difference in whatever way we can. This is a really important case that's coming before the Supreme Court, because it is really focused on a case where they will decide whether domestic violence, people who are subject to domestic violence protection orders, for most people, we understand that as restraining orders. And in order to go through that process, I mean, there is significant due process that happens in that situation for a domestic violence order to be issued against someone. It's whether they're accused of it, but that means that they have gone through a judicial process to begin with to get to that point. And what the Supreme Court will be reviewing is whether they should be allowed to be in possession of a gun, whether they should retain their rights to have that gun. And we're amici of the court, friends of the court, by filing an amicus brief. And we are saying that this is something that we don't believe should happen. We should not overturn something that has been here as a protection for people, because we do think that there's going to be precedent set for other violent offenders, potential violent criminals, where this could actually have effects broadly across the board of people who shouldn't be in the possession of a gun or taking it away temporarily while this issue is ongoing. We do think that that is important to protect people from violent people and protect potential victims where this could escalate and lead to a significantly tragic situation. I think one of the, I'd say it's a combination, honestly, whether it's universal background checks combined with red flag laws, because a lot of the time a gun can be purchased legally. It's a universal background check that happens, but the red flag law could have caught potentially a measure there where there were concerns about the individual mental health state, whether there were concerns about the potential for violence or aggression in that situation. So I think a combination of those, we could really make a difference and go a long way. We won't solve, no measure is going to solve all of these problems. And certainly there's no one way to resolve this issue. But I do believe that we can start to make a difference by implementing some of these things, especially. So I think those two together could really go a long way.